on the heels of their editorial last week calling for the end of the Nobel Peace Prize in response to Donald Trump getting not one, but two nominations for peace deals that he's negotiated. I mean, my God, the dude is dropping peace deals out of the air like confetti. It's fantastic. But the Atlantic was not so impressed with them. And last week, I covered it on this channel. They published an editorial denouncing the Nobel Peace Prize and basically saying, we're going to take our toys and go home. Let's just get rid of it. It means nothing now. Donald Trump hasn't even won the dang thing. He's only gotten a couple nominations. He's probably not going to win it, truth be told, even though he absolutely deserves it. He's already negotiated 3 more peace deals than Obama had negotiated when he won the Nobel Peace Prize. But for the Atlantic, a nomination is just too much to bear. Well, they followed that up nicely with this piece that came out the other day. And what it seems to be is the Atlantic is like wrestling with this idea that Donald Trump might win the election. Of course, Donald Trump is going to win the election. Democrats have been rioting in the streets for over 100 days. Or I shouldn't say Democrats. That's not being nuanced, and it's not being generous. Most Democrats are not out rioting in the streets, but they're supporting the people that are rioting in the streets. And so for my money, it really is just as bad if you're supporting the rioters and you're supporting the looting and you're supporting people coming out and saying Trump is sending his stormtroopers into Portland. Like, you're part of the problem, dude. You're part of the problem. But what seems to be happening is they are wrestling with this idea that Trump's probably going to win. And now what they're doing is they're trying to scare the electorate into voting for Joe Biden, because if they don't vote for Joe Biden, the Democrats are going to keep rioting. That is literally what they're saying in this article. So we're going to give this a read, and I'm going to talk about why I think the Atlantic is crazy, and we're going to look at some polling numbers and all that good stuff. But before we get into that, folks, I'm trying to grow the channel. If you like the content I'm putting out, you've probably watched about an average of 3 other videos at this point. If you enjoy what I'm doing, please consider subscribing, turning on notifications, giving it a thumbs up. Only about half of you that are watching this video are actually subscribed to the channel, and I'd like to just get that percentage down just a little bit. Now, if you think you're subscribed, just go ahead and double check for me, because YouTube's gonna YouTube. All right, let's take a look at this article. The Democrats may not be able to concede if Trump wins, especially after losing the popular vote. The left may draw the wrong conclusions. What this essentially is saying is that if Trump wins again, well, the left, they're just going to be, oh my God, shocked that the electorate would vote for Trump again, just like they did in 2016. This is the era of expecting the worst while hoping for the merely tolerable. Some might say the worst is already happening, economic disaster and 200,000 dead from a pandemic, while the president and his surrogates insist in a feat of self-delusion that the best is yet to come. Now let's talk about self-delusion for a second, Atlantic. Before the pandemic hit, let's talk about the economy. The economy was literally the best economy that this country has ever seen. Black unemployment rate, all-time record low. Hispanic unemployment rate, all-time record low. Asian unemployment rate, all-time record low. Young professional unemployment rate, the lowest it had been in 52 years. Donald Trump was kicking ass and taking names when it came to the economy, and now you want to talk about self-delusion. He was the one that built the best economy in history. It got taken out because of a pandemic and because of all these Democratic mayors and governors who are refusing to open things back up. And you want to blame him for that? No dice, man. No dice. You guys never wanted to give Trump credit for the economy before the pandemic, but as soon as the pandemic hits, oh, it's Trump's economy. It's his fault. Please. As someone who has argued against catastrophism, I don't believe Donald Trump is a fascist or a dictator in the making. Well, thank God for that. And I don't believe America is a failed state. I find myself truly worried about only one scenario: that Trump will win re-election and Democrats and others on the left will be unwilling, even unable, to accept the result. And let's just be really clear here, folks. no one would actually be surprised if Democrats were unable to accept the results. Democrats have been unable to accept the result for 4 flipping years, almost 4 flipping years to be generous. When I started breaking out of my liberal echo chamber, it was really to answer one question. Why did Donald Trump win? That was why I started originally listening to voices that were not from MSNBC or were from the New York Times or Washington Post. I wanted to understand what happened. You know what happened when I started reading articles and listening to videos that were outside of my echo chamber? All of my friends said, Carlin, no, don't do it. Don't even consider these ideas. They are fascist. They don't want to know. That's why this is happening. Let's keep going. A loss by Joe Biden under these circumstances is the worst case, not because Trump will destroy America, he can't, but because it is the outcome most likely to undermine faith in democracy, resulting in more of the social unrest and street battles that cities, including Portland, Oregon, and Seattle have seen in recent months. So what this article is literally saying is, if Trump wins, there's going to be more violence. You don't want there to be more violence, do you? Then you better vote for Biden, because if Trump wins, they're just going to keep rioting in Portland and Seattle. They're basically going to come to your suburban neighborhood, and those rioters are going to be kicking down your doors because they just couldn't accept another Trump presidency. That's what this article is saying. For this reason, strictly law and order Republicans, who have responded in dismay to scenes of rioting and looting, have an interest in Biden winning, even if they can never bring themselves to vote for him. Okay. You want to say that Republicans have an interest in Biden winning? Like, this is obviously written by a person that has never actually spoken to a Republican or a conservative or a Trump supporter. And by the way, Republican is not the same thing as Trump supporter. Trump supporters are a completely new... I maintain my position that Trump has effectively created a third party. Yes, it tends to attract more of those from the right, but Trump supporters are not necessarily Republicans. I am not a Republican. I am not a Republican in any way, shape, or form. I don't plan to become a Republican anytime soon, and I'm still very much a Trump supporter because, sadly, words I never thought I would say, he is the lone voice of sanity in this chaos. In presidential elections, once is a fluke, twice is a pattern. I struggle to imagine how, beyond utter shock, millions of Democrats will process a Trump victory. A loss for Biden, after having been the clear favorite all summer, would provoke mass delusion with electoral politics as a means of change at a time when disillusion is already dangerously high. If Democrats can't beat a candidate as unpopular as Trump during a devastating pandemic and massive economic contraction, then are they even capable of winning presidential elections anymore? Well, to be honest with you, I dang well hope not. I really hope the Democrats are not capable right now of winning a presidential election. But let's talk about this contention that Trump is wildly unpopular. Let's take a look at Trump's job approval, shall we? So you can see, Trump's job approval has been up and down. This is Real Clear Politics aggregate polling, and it really took quite a dip here. In July, it took quite a dip. It looks like the lowest was about 41 for job approval, but what's been happening? What's been happening to the wildly unpopular Donald Trump? His job approval is going up, and it's 45 right now. So Trump is actually doing pretty good. He's moving up. And so this notion that Trump is wildly unpopular, it's just not true, man. It's just not true. Listen, let's talk about the polls for a second. There are different sets of polls. There are internal polls, and then there are the polls that you read about on the news. The polls that you read about on the news are on the news for a reason. They want to give you a very specific perception of what is going on in the campaign. The internal polls that the campaigns look at are a completely different thing. Those are probably going to be much more accurate, but they're not going to be the ones that show up on the news, especially when they're coming from the Biden camp, because I would bet, frankly, all the money in my bank account that Joe Biden's internal polls do not show Joe Biden winning. I would bet all the money in my bank account that that is the truth. The external polls are showing that. That is not the same thing, okay? Polls can vary for a wide variety of reasons. They can vary because of who they're sampling, how they're sampling. Look at the makeup of the respondents to a lot of these polls. What you're going to see is that they have oversampled Democrats and undersampled Republicans to give you a very distinct impression that Joe Biden is winning. Well, you oversampled Democrats and undersampled the Republicans. Of course you have that impression. That just makes sense. Let's keep going. Democracy, after all, is supposed to self-correct after mistakes, particularly mistakes as egregious as electing Donald Trump. Like, here's my question. Who the hell are you to say that the voters made a mistake? The voters voted, man. The voters voted, they got their choice, and the Democrats haven't been able to accept it. Just because you don't like the outcome of the election does not mean it is an egregious mistake. Liberals had enough trouble accepting the results of the 2016 election. In some sense, they never really came to terms with it. You think? The past 4 years have witnessed the continuous urge to explain away the inexplicable, to find solace in the fact that the voters betrayed them. Atlantic. Let's talk about this for a second. The voters do not have an obligation to you. The voters do not have an obligation to vote the way the Democratic Party wants them to vote. The Democratic Party should have made a better case and, frankly, picked a better candidate. How could so many of their fellow Americans side with a racist and fabulous, someone so callous and seemingly without empathy? And this goes back to my point about Democrats and people on the left not wanting to understand why Donald Trump won. Donald Trump is not a racist. Donald Trump is not a misogynist. And the people who actually listen to what the man says knows that. I mean, listen, he has gaffes every once in a while, just like Joe Biden has gaffes. Joe Biden has had way more racist gaffes than Donald Trump has, by the way. Let me bring you back to a couple months ago or whatever that was, when Joe Biden said that if you were black and didn't vote for him, you weren't really black. That's incredibly racist. Are you kidding me? But they just let that go. Oh, Joe Biden, he misspoke. Where Donald Trump has a gaffe where it sounds like he says something racist, and that's all they play. They take that one thing out of context and they play it over and over and over again. Did he screw up? Yeah, probably. Could he have been more clear? Sure. But Joe Biden's gaffes are significantly worse than Donald Trump's. I was going to skip down here a little bit because there's a lot of nonsense in this article. To some degree, let's talk about the Electoral College. Liberals have convinced themselves that Republicans are, in one way or another, cheating. In addition to all of Trump's norm breaking, the GOP is gerrymandering, purging voter rolls, and shutting down polling places in black neighborhoods. And the Democrats are trying to get mail-in voting because they know they can game the system. Yet Republicans wouldn't have been able to do these things if they hadn't won enough statewide and local offices in the first place. And you guys got to keep that up. You got to vote red, straight GD ticket, straight ticket for your local offices, your state offices, everything. Yet Republicans, I already read that, they have put themselves in a position to enact their favorite redistricting and electoral procedures by finding candidates and pursuing policies that have made them competitive, blah, blah, blah. To some degree, this is just how the game is played, and the Democrats need to play better if they want to win the Electoral College. The Democrats had 3 years to figure this out. Actually, I mean, maybe not 3 total years. If you're talking about the election, I mean, the primaries really kick up 2 years before the general. So they had really 2 years to enact a game plan, to find candidates that were capable of winning the Electoral College. They didn't do that. They had plenty of time. They probably had all the resources of the party. Who did they end up with? Joe Biden. Considering the lopsided stakes, Democrats have every right to be nervous. I mean, I frankly think Republicans have more right to be nervous than the Democrats. The Democrats are the one rioting. They're the ones going into suburban neighborhoods, keeping people up at night, protesting, shining lights in people's windows. Like, they're the ones enacting violence. The Republicans have a lot more reason to be nervous right now than the Democrats. The anxiety gripping the two parties is asymmetric. That's true. But again, the Republicans are actually having the worst of it, not the Democrats. Biden is at least marginally more acceptable ideologically and certainly temperamentally to Republican voters than Trump is to Democratic voters. You sure about that? Trump represents the nativist wing of an already nativist Republican Party, so it is understandable that Democrats of any stripe would fear him more. So this guy has honestly convinced himself that Joe Biden, who clearly has dementia, is more palatable to conservative voters than Trump is to people on the left. Dude, there is not a walkaway movement on the left. There's not. I'm sorry. I know the Democrats in their convention, they tried to spin that there was a walkaway movement. There is an actual walkaway movement of people leaving the Democrats to go to the Republicans. The walkaway group on Facebook has grown exponentially in the past several months. I think there are over 500,000 people right now in that group. Where's the Democrats' evidence? They don't have it because they don't have something similar. Biden, on the other hand, is a conventional Democrat representing the center of the Democratic Party. When Biden is negotiating with Bernie Sanders and plans to enact Bernie Sanders' plans and wants to bring on Beto O'Rourke to be his gun czar, who's already said they're going to take away our guns, that is not a centrist philosophy. It's not. Sorry. If Biden, of all people, is beyond the pale, then so is half the country. Yes. Because Joe Biden is not the Joe Biden of old. And frankly, the Joe Biden of old, while funny and kind of likable to a certain extent, I mean, he wasn't really that great either, if we're honest. If half the country is actively supporting violence, then yes, half the country is beyond the pale. Let's skip down here to the bottom. The distance between what a society should be and the tragedy of what it actually becomes is less of a problem in democracies because democracies are supposed to be responsive to voters' demands and grievances, which is why Democrats need to start wrapping their head around the fact that Donald Trump is going to win. He is going to win because his base is going to come out and support him. The enthusiasm gap between Trump and Biden is huge. Donald Trump's voters, I've said it myself, man, I will crawl through broken glass to vote for Trump in person on election day. Joe Biden's voters aren't feeling that. I'm sorry. But they aren't always. The gap will grow larger under a Trump presidency than a Biden one. And this has implications for mass unrest, political violence across American cities. Again, this article is literally threatening that if you don't vote for Joe Biden, there's going to be mass unrest. That's what they're saying. That's what the argument this guy is making. I mean, the Democrats are getting so desperate, it is actually insane. And you know what? When I was reading this article, it reminded me of this thread that Dave Rubin sent out the other day. You know, I mean, people like Eric Weinstein have actively been pushing back on the idea of either a Trump or a Biden presidency with this unity party ticket. But frankly, this is a reflection more of their own Trump derangement syndrome than anything else. And I think Dave absolutely nailed it in this thread. He says, Trump is the last stand against the evil and corruption of the media, the Democratic Party, the tech platforms, and the universities. No other politician is going to stand up to them. Confusing that just welcomes more of the lunacy and hastens the implosion. This misdirect, always finding a way to blame Trump as the left burns the country to the ground, is akin to complaining that the last guy guarding the gate talks funny and is rude as he keeps the barbarians at bay. Trump is imperfect, but he isn't the cause of this lunacy. Dave is absolutely correct. Listen, man, and frankly, Trump supporters know this. Trump supporters know this. They know this. This is why they are supporting Donald Trump. This is why there is such a big walkaway movement from the left to the right, because Donald Trump is literally the last line of defense in regards to this insanity. Listen, man, Trump is not a perfect candidate, but guess what? If the Democrats make the choice to not accept the results of the election in November and make the choice to continue in looting and rioting, that's not Trump's fault. That is the fault of the governors and the mayors who are allowing it. Listen, I woke up this morning and was looking at news out of Lancaster, who they've had rioting in regards to this shooting that happened the other day. And what did the police in Lancaster do? They arrested the rioters, and they set a really high bail for the rioters so they couldn't leave jail. And what do you notice? It solved the problem. If the Democratic mayors would just step up to the plate and let the police do their job, the riots would stop. It really is that simple, folks. All right, that's all I've got for this one. I'll see you guys soon.